Welcome to Truth Telling with Elizabeth D'Alto, the podcast dedicated to focusing on the truth that is always evolving within us and around us, where we explore the potentiality of truth as a highly esteemed value at a time in history when most people have more on their plates than any one human should. If you're new to me, full expression is my jam. Some words people have used to describe me range from speaker, trainer, coach, healer, writer, spiritual advisor, teacher, podcaster, and someone even called me their soul Sherpa once. I'm less concerned with titles or labels and more interested in results, change, and creating a world we want to, can, and are proud to live in. A kinder, gentler, more curious, collaborative, reverent world where people respect each other's backgrounds, experiences, and truths. They trust in themselves, in life, and recognize that we need each other. And they know how to cultivate healthy relationships to true power, not the very unhealthy kind of power our current culture is predicated upon. Speaking of our culture, there's a lot of noise and ignorance in our current culture, and this show aims to cut through that by exploring the truths of a diverse range of incredible voices. From authors, artists, creatives, and educators to activists, speakers, and those in various scientific and esoteric fields, our guests hail from cultures and countries all over the world. We post a new interview every Monday, and if you want to keep up with the show notes and quotes from our guests, you can follow me on Instagram at Elizabeth D'Alto. You can expect a wide range of topics when you tune into this show. Everything from health, communication, money, success, parenting, desire, sex, love, and spirituality, to making pivots and transitions in life, and topics related to psychology, storytelling, gender and race issues, emotional intelligence, activism, advocacy, and much more. A few disclaimers. No episode of the show is meant for everyone, and every episode is meant for whoever needs it on the right day at the right time. Not all guest views will reflect my own, and that's intentional. We don't learn, grow, heal, or improve by staying in our comfortable bubbles with all of our people who look, think, or live exactly how we do. If you love what you hear and find it useful and inspiring, the best way to show your appreciation is to share the episode, subscribe to the show, and leave us a rating and review wherever you listen in from. Thank you so much for being here with me. Here we go. This is episode number 258 of Truth Telling with Elizabeth D'Alto, and today I've got Amber Ray with us. Amber has been called a millennial motivator by Fortune and the Brené Brown of Wonder by Mind Body Green. She's an author, an artist, and a speaker whose work invites you to live your truth, befriend your emotion, and express your gifts. So as you can imagine, we had a really fun, really playful, and really deep conversation today. I got to chat with Amber right on the heels of her new book coming out, so we explored a ton of things related to life and creativity. Her big truth was around the truths she doesn't want to look at. She asked the question, do you tell your journal the truth? Which sparked this conversation around our willingness to look at our shadows, our anxieties, and our worries. We talked about capitalism, how wonder is curiosity in action, being slightly more curious than afraid, how wonder can help us with negative emotions, the difference between fear and intuition, developing characters to relate to yourself objectively, and identifying our creative aches. Whether you live a creative life or not, there are so many gems in this discussion about navigating the things that keep us from our fullest love, expression, and joy every single day. So enjoy this one, share it up. The show notes can be found at untameyourself.com/TT-258. That's untameyourself.com/T as in truth, T as in telling, -258. As well, if you have yet to check out the Patreon page, head on over to patreon.com/Elizabeth Untamed. That's Patreon, patreon.com/Elizabeth Untamed. What I'm doing over there is finally fulfilling on these amazing answers and feedback you all gave me last year about how I can serve our community, how I can connect with you more, what I can create for you that you would actually use and find extremely useful and transformative, as well as how you can connect with each other. We're out here in the world. I get so many amazing notes from you all in my inboxes thanking me for the work. And I know that it would be so amazing for you to be able to get to know each other, interact with each other, have these discussions. You all have so much more in common than you could ever possibly imagine. And whether you live near each other or not, being in community with other wild souls, with other people who are committed to truth-telling and living in their truths in their own lives is a really amazing thing. So there's a couple different options for how you can do that over on the Patreon page. So I'll let you check that out, and let's get into today's episode. Amber Ray, how are you?
I'm good. How are you?
I'm good. I'm excited to talk about this topic of choosing wonder over worry, which I know you have a book coming out, and we'll get into that. But before we get into any of these things, we want to let people know Amber lives in Brooklyn, and there might be a train. So for those of you that are hardcore listeners that have been with me since the beginning, is it coming now? Perfect.
It's coming right now.
You might remember when I used to live by this train and we called it the Train of Truth. So we might have a Train of Truth, which is even more appropriate because the show used to be called Untamed the Wild Soul, but now it's called Truth Telling. So we kind of need a Train of Truth.
I love it. I love it.
So what is a truth that's having a big impact on your life right now?
I love this question and I love that you rename the show Truth Telling. I just think that is the most powerful art that in speaking our truth is so important. And, the truth that has had a big impact on me lately are the truths that I don't often want to look at, which has been really interesting. I went to a workshop with Cheryl Strayed about a year ago. And Cheryl, the first question she asked was, do you tell your journal the truth?
And
I was like,
Cheryl came out hot.
She came. That was like the first thing she said. And I was like, oh. And, this process of bringing a book into the world has brought a lot to the surface, a lot of insecurities, fears of being seen. And I've just been allowing these truths inside of me, these stories I tell myself, to come to the surface. And so I think the truth that's having the biggest impact is a willingness to look at the shadow, a willingness to look at the anxieties and the worries, and to look at them with curiosity and love and see what's there for me.
I love that. And that's basically the whole premise for the book, isn't it?
Yeah. And I didn't mean to do that, but that's what I mean. So can I tell a tiny story that I feel like is relevant for your people?
Yeah, and I want to say I wasn't being like, oh, are you just plugging the book? It actually feels to me like this thing that we've talked about on the show many times, which is if you're going to dare to teach a thing or write about a thing, you're going to be initiated by the freaking thing.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. Hardcore initiation.
Yeah. So what's the story?
So over the weekend, in the process of writing this book, I've met all these characters, which are like Worry's friends and Wonder's friends. So I have like Grace, who's this inner perfectionist, and I have this like hustler for approval and like all these voices. And I discovered a new voice over the weekend, which was a truth that was revealed to me, which is Mr. Moore. And I realized that Mr. Moore, he looks like a sergeant, and he like really is all about discipline and force, and you have to do it this way, and you have to reach this goal, and nee. And then there's Miss Enough. So Mr. Moore and Miss Enough are often in conflict with each other. And Miss Enough is like in a white goddess dress, of course, and is like, you have done enough. This is perfect. You are fully prepared, and is the one that, is all about nourishment and self-care. And I realized just this weekend that they've been battling with each other because I've had this, like, I need to do more to like get the message out there. And Miss Enough is like, and you've done enough and we're prepared and we're ready. And so just noticing how different aspects of ourselves can battle with each other and what those battles, how they can play out in our lives.
Yeah. And so I know our audience are sharp people, but in case anyone missed it, she's talking about like these inner voices, like naming these inner voices, these inner archetypes, these different energies and things that are coming up. So I love that because I think our culture is very much situated around more, never enough.
Yeah.
How is that entrained into you?
I mean, I feel like, our entire capitalism is built around this story of not enough. And I remember being an 11-year-old girl looking at magazine covers and thinking, oh, I'm supposed to look like her. Or if I don't, I'm not worthy or lovable, or I'm not good enough. Or looking at, photoshopped ads, which is just an unrealistic and unattainable ideal. And, I think that was conditioned in me at an early age or in school. Like if it wasn't 4.0 and straight A's, you're not doing enough. You're not performing well enough. And, those are the sorts of conditioning that I think really, really stifles us. That's what I think of as like the worry conditioning.
Yeah. And it's all based on doing.
Yeah.
Not necessarily honoring our being. I was having a conversation with my brother recently. He actually listens to the podcast, and he had a revelation.
Yeah.
He wasn't like a high performer in school because school just wasn't his gig. My brother is so smart, so creative. He can do so many incredible things. Like, I play the piano because I took piano lessons and I can read music. I don't think he even knows how to read music, and he can play the piano way better than I can. Like, that's an intelligence, right? That's an area of intelligence that isn't necessarily honored in our culture because it's not necessarily based on doing more, taking more lessons, showing up on time.
Yeah.
All those like structured, regimented things. So, talk to me about curiosity is one of my greatest, it's not even just an aspect of who I am, it's a value for me.
Mm-hmm.
So I love that like built into wonder is curiosity. Can you talk about it?
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I think of wonder as curiosity in action.
Yeah.
And whether that's, being curious about a story we tell ourselves, a belief that we're holding on to that's not serving us, more of the internal looking within curiosities, or curiosities around, I feel drawn to art, or, I really want to go over there because my body is feeling pulled there, or I'm curious about what that person's doing because it looks interesting. I feel like curiosity, both looking within and then being pulled outside of ourselves, is the greatest tool for self-discovery.
Yeah. And you are a person who follows your curiosity quite a lot. And I know, again, I'm really big on acknowledging whenever we have guests on the show, it's like, obviously not everyone is in a position to just like travel the world or go here or go there or take time off and write a book or, do whatever. I don't even know if you took time off to write the book or if you were working at the same time. But I always just want to like acknowledge that we're well aware. And how does any of that factor in for you as you're like, do you have guilt? Do you ever have any guilt about following your curiosity and prioritizing wonder?
I definitely used to. I think when I was just, because I went the whole traditional corporate Silicon Valley like path, like achieving blah, 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 and then realized, this isn't for me. And when I started to more explore my curiosities, A, the people around me thought I was nuts. Mm-hmm. And B, I felt guilty and like I should be spending my time differently. So it was a lot of that should language.
Yeah.
My life should be like this in order to fit in, be accepted, and be approved of. And, it took many years of peeling back like, okay, well, where did I learn that? Where is that should coming from? And what could I do instead?
Yeah.
And, following curiosity doesn't have to look like, quitting your job, selling everything you own and moving across the country. It can look like painting 5 minutes a day. Mm-hmm. Or sending one scary ask because you're just curious enough to see what happens, or sending 10 scary asks, and it's just, for me, curiosity is, and I feel like every decision I've ever made has really come from a place of, I'm slightly more curious than afraid. And let me just see what may emerge from this. Like literally, like even when I started making art, which how this happened is my body, I felt like pulled this one direction in Lower Manhattan and went into this art gallery. And I looked at the mixed media art lining the walls, and a voice inside my head, which I like to think of as the wonder voice, said, it's time to make some art, which was quickly followed up by another voice that said, art, who the hell are you to make art? You didn't go to art school, which was that voice of worry. And I really leaned into wonder and like found out who owned the gallery. He started teaching me how to make art. I found out an art festival was happening in my neighborhood. And like, there were so many moments where I could have been like, oh, like, I don't know what I'm doing. I've never made art before, wish I hadn't. But instead I like reached out to the person who was running the festival and asked if they had space for a project, thinking like, and I'm thinking I'm going to insult her because applications closed 3 months ago. But again, I was like slightly more curious than afraid. And that opened all these doors of possibility.
I like that. Thank you for sharing. I want to know, how does someone get to the place of being slightly more curious than afraid?
That's a really, really great question. I mean,
or how did you get there? How do you get there?
Yeah, I'm like, how do I do this for someone else? How I get there is, first through just noticing that there's curiosity at all. Mm-hmm. And so I feel like in the early stages when I didn't know who the hell I was or what I wanted, I just knew that the way I was living was not me. And I felt so far away from myself and my truth that, I started something called, I started a clue journal, and I would, just take this little notepad around with me. And anytime I found something that was slightly interesting, I would write it down.
How old were you when you were doing this?
This is like 22.
I love it because to me, this just feels like a little kid playing detective, which is exactly, but that's like, there's an element, in my perception, there's an element of wonder that is like, because you hear the term childlike wonder, right? Yeah, like it requires you to go back because like, that's how we were as kids. We're like picking up shells, bugs, collecting shit, coming home with things in our pockets. Our parents like, what the hell is that? So keep going, but I love it already.
I mean, I was like, oh, I like the color turquoise. I don't know why, but I like the color turquoise. Like, I mean, I literally was feeling like that because as a kid, I was always like this, like curious little detective. Yeah. And I love that you brought that up because it was also like, wait, what did I love doing when I was a kid?
Yeah.
And I started to infuse some of that into my life. And, for me, that was like everything from like biking to like, I was really into AOL and online magazines. So like creating content was always a thing that I was doing as a kid. Strange kid, I know. Or like, the books I was reading, I started to really look back and then also just notice where I felt drawn to. And what I think is interesting about clues is that clues either like when we experience something or when I experience something, but humans in general, resonance is either positive, like we have a positive resonance or like ooh, I don't like that resonance, or it's neutral. And when it's neutral, it's just not for us. Yeah. But if it's like creates this like negative like sensation in our body, there's information there for us, just if we feel so attracted and drawn. And so when I was jotting clues, I would also be like, asshole pissed me off because they like cut me off walking down this, or whatever it was that like made me angry or made me feel envious or made me, had a feeling, or like when I felt anxious, I would jot those down as clues as well because that was also information.
I'm so glad to hear you say it's almost like the negative clues, the dissonant clues, and not just like the light and the fun, wondrous part. So a distinction I made at some point last year, because a question I get a lot in my work is how do you distinguish between fear and intuition? And so one of the things that I started really looking at, or how do I know the difference between when I'm in resistance or when I'm actually afraid? And one of the things I started distinguishing is the difference between resistance and dissonance, right? Because resistance is like, I think what you just described as negative resonance, where it's something is like, there's something there for you. Yeah. Versus the like, this is just not for me. That's just like a straight up. So I'm curious if put in that context, how would you, and does that, number one, does that even resonate for you? Because I don't need to be right. It's like a theory I literally made up. And number two, how do you register that? Is it sensations in your body? Like what pulls you? How do you interact with your intuition in that way?
Yeah, I love that you brought this up. It's a question I've been thinking a lot about, the difference between, fear and intuition. And I find that fear is highly emotional. So it's like my heart is beating fast. I have like really strong emotional opinion about how this is not right. Like typically that's more fear talking versus intuition is like quiet, still, I'm calm. I'm having this like feeling emerge. And then I like can feel in my body. It's not as like, like angry or just like highly, with a high level of energy. And this, it's funny. I almost bought an Airstream and I went to Portland, was like going to turn it into the Wonder Stream and take it around the country. And what happened is every day at 3 a.m. I woke up very anxious, like before the purchase. And I like to think of anxiety as our loyal friend that wakes us up in the middle of the night to tell us that something's not okay. Yeah. And at first I was like, okay, this is fear talking. Like I feel anxious. I feel highly emotional about this. That's interesting. Okay. And so it almost took me talking down the fear to get to what the intuition had to say. And so I sometimes think of it almost like layers of an onion, where I first had to peel back and be like, okay, fear, you're very loud right now. Like, I see you trying to protect me. What is it that you want me to know? And, fear was like, this logistically feels really challenging. And like, I don't know about this, and like had all these operational concerns. And so once I had heard fear out, I was like, thank you for your information. And then I was able to like, because I acknowledged it, heard it, and let it speak, it no longer was really loud and driving me. Yeah. Then once fear had sort of like rested and calmed down, then there was like this intuitive hit of like, this is just not the right time.
Yeah.
No. And that's when I heard a quiet no, no, no. And so for me, it's all around like the body, the sensations, and the level of emotion.
And what's going on in your head? Because like there's a relationship between thoughts and emotions. So I'm curious, what's going on in your head when you're having all that fear?
Well, yeah, and that's, I think, really interesting to label. What was going on in my head were all those like operational worries and
Got it.
thinking about how am I going to take this across the country, and like the timeline and the like cost and like, all of those, which felt like just like a noise of fear that I couldn't even distinguish the thoughts. So the first step is always like to first name them. Mm-hmm. And so that was okay, let me write down every single fear thought and just like get it all out on paper so that I can look at it and be more objective.
Cool. So I know also, we've kind of started talking about this, but I want to go a bit deeper, that for the most part, the premise of your book is like wonder is the antidote for the negative emotions, especially like anxiety, fear, worry, and all those things. So how else? So we've talked about the curiosity. What other gems do you want to impart on us right now around that?
Yeah. Well, what comes up is, the question people often ask me is, how do I get rid of my worry, or how do I make my fear go away? Mm-hmm. And I feel like that's just, we're asking ourselves the wrong question, because worry and fear have evolved with us to protect us and keep us safe. And when we remember that worry and fear are really, and I like to almost even think of fear sometimes as love in disguise. Because like I think of this moment when I was a kid and I was running down the lawn chasing this ball, and my mom screamed out because she thought I was going to get hit by a car. When I ran into the street, and that was that was love masked as fear, because she was so afraid something might happen to me. So oftentimes worry and fear are like very loud and urgent because they're trying to protect us. So realizing that. And then I think with that, it's, then knowing that worry and fear are kind of here for the long haul. Mm-hmm. How do we have a relationship with them? And how do we relate to them? Because it's, the worry, the fear, the shame, the grief, the anxiety, those aren't the issue. It's what our relationship with them is.
Yeah.
And so where I see wonder, like wonder is such a beautiful detective tool to both be like, to get curious about what information that emotion or that sensation has for us. Because, often there's insights, there's wisdom, that's information to be gleaned from those like more quote unquote negative places.
Yeah. Yeah. I don't remember what specific book or thing, but many years ago, hearing of a Wayne Dyer making that frame. Like if you're thinking I'm afraid of something, swap out afraid for I'm curious about that same thing. Mm-hmm. I feel like that makes a lot of sense, because you're having the thoughts anyway. Why not guide them in a helpful direction instead of feeding the fear? I'm also really curious. So how you have tested this out and used it. You've talked a little bit about your own life. I'm curious about more in your own life, but also with others, like in your work. So what I'm curious about is how this tests and gets results in different contexts. Does that make sense?
Yeah, totally makes sense. So, I mean, first, it was a personal discovery of like, oh, this is interesting. And, and then developing all these characters, having conversations with these characters, because I have like a 3-step process. And then, of course, it was workshopping that with other people, holding circles, doing different retreats in different places, meeting with neuroscientists and psychotherapists, and finding out that like some of my discoveries actually match like deep therapeutic techniques that I was unaware of. And so it was both like, for me, I've always used myself as a guinea pig. I lost my father when I was quite young, and that had me start to really get curious about psychology and how we work and psychotherapy. And I began journaling really young. And so I've always been using myself as this guinea pig. But then, of course, it was like taking the discoveries and like making sure that like they were valid.
Yeah.
Having the conversations with the like quote unquote experts to, because so much of mine was experiential and something that I discovered on my own, but making sure that, there's a case and there's some evidence-based techniques around these things.
How did you go about doing that? This is just me being a geek, right? I'm just like you in that sense. With Wild Soul Movement, I created the practice, and then I started realizing that there were all kinds of things: somatic experiencing, Kundalini yoga, things that are like, oh, a lot of these elements already existed. I just like synthesized a thing. So, dear everyone, don't try to tell me collective intelligence isn't a thing. But
totally.
So talk about that, because that probably had to be nerve-wracking to like have this thing that you discovered, it works for you, and be like, okay, I gotta go ask these like academic scientist type of people. Like, I know in my brain I'd be like, they probably want to prove me wrong, you know, like.
Yeah, totally. And I just want to acknowledge that I love that about both of our, you know, we're so led by intuition.
Yeah.
And so we like found these things through intuition. And they're like, oh wait, this is actually a thing.
This is a thing.
You know, some of it was like stalking down a neuroscientist at Stanford and like ending up at his home in Los Altos and having dinner. He like had a pizza oven, like his wife is cooking pizza, and I'm like talking to him about some of these discoveries and ideas. And I'd heard him on Being with Krista Tippett, and I was just like, I was obsessed. And he had he does run the Center of Compassion and Altruism at Stanford. And so just tracking him down and then being like, okay, here's what I'm seeing, and him being like, yes, and here's the neuroscience that supports that. Or like, hey, go look at Dr. Dan Siegel, who like coined the frame, name it to tame it. And so it was like finding core sources. And then those sources often led me to like 10 to 15 other sources. And some of that was like, you know, I didn't meet every single person, but I studied their work. I found out their sources. I understood like where their perspective was coming from. And, you know, I will say that it was a dance between getting, you know, because it's like, I know what has worked for me and I know what I've experienced working for other people. I have that sort of like knowing that's enough.
Yeah.
Just as much as like finding out what the expert opinion is. And it was this like really delicate dance between like, oh, wait, am I trying to write like a super research-based scientific book? Or is it more narrative driven where I weave in the science? And I decided I was more narrative driven where I weave in the science, because the other, like, while like a perfectly great book is not the book that I'm here to write.
Yeah.
And so that's where I had to like pause and be like, okay, I'm so curious about this domain, and I could like actually lose my own voice in it.
Yes. Okay. So I love geeking out on creative process. So I want to talk more about the book by talking more about writing the book.
Great. Oh man, writing the book. Woo! So,
Train of Truth went by.
I know. Woo! That was an intense. So I got the deal just about a year ago, and they asked me, can you write the book in 2.5 months? To which my curiosity was just slightly larger than my fear. And I was like, of course. And so I basically told my friends and family, hi, I'm going to disappear for a little while, and I am going to birth this in 2.5 months. I love you. But what was so interesting is that when I sat down to do the writing, the proposal I had written, I felt like was almost irrelevant. It was like, again, if you think of creativity as like going deeper and deeper into layers, I feel like the proposal helped me peel back these initial layers, and there was so much more depth I wanted to get to and access. But I had a voice inside my head, Ryan Holiday actually, and Ryan Holiday had said, don't write a word of your book until you have the structure figured out. Well, I didn't like my structure anymore. And I could either think my way to a structure, or I could intuit and create my way to a structure. And I decided to do the latter. And so I just really started with the stories. And the question I asked myself was like, what are the stories that I ache to tell? And I really gave myself a period of permission to, like, per Cheryl Strayed, where, like, do you tell your journal the truth? Like, what truth am I afraid to enter? And what are the untold stories that I'm even afraid to look at? So like really like, how can I choose wonder over worry around my own stories and around like this own book? So the book almost at first started as this like healing journey for me of looking at all of these different worry myths that were inside of me. And as I was doing that, I started meeting all these different characters. It was almost like fear would come visit me and talk to me, or like the perfectionist would come visit me and talk to me through like showing up when I'm trying to write me like, this is terrible. Everyone's going to hate it. You suck. I can't believe you got this book advance. They're going to take the money away from you. And then like interacting with those characters by choosing wonder and dialoguing with them and practicing the work. So like the writing process was the initiation. And what happened is that like I was then talking to shame and like talking to anxiety and talking to all these different parts. And then the book got structured based on my own like real life experience meeting these characters. So in the book, you meet worry, you meet wonder, you meet shame, anxiety, fear, courage, compassion, curiosity, wisdom. And it's, bringing those characters to life through story, through, exercises, journal entries, all those sorts of things.
Cool.
So it really was like super emergent.
I'm really interested. So your journey into art happened before this book.
Yes.
We can never know for sure, but how do you think that practice and that curiosity guided or allowed you to have this be your creative process for your book? Is there a correlation is what I'm wondering.
Yeah, I was way too fucking controlling. So like, before I started making art, I wanted everything to be like controlled and perfect and it was just like, I don't think I would have given myself the space to really like be the artist. So I think of like in any creative process, there's the artist phase, the editor phase, and the agent phase. The artist is like, I just want to create for creation's sake. The editor is like, now let's package this for an audience's consumption. And then an agent is like, now let's sell the shit out of this.
Yeah.
And so knowing who you're being in any moment is really important. And before I made art, my editor was so present all the time that I never really allowed my artists to speak up and lead. And so by doing it, I'm actually only having this aha moment with you right now. I didn't realize this until right now.
Oh, cool. I love when that happens sometimes. It's great.
Yeah, I'm like, oh my God, now I know why I did art before I did that. Because there was a part of me that was like, did I pursue art because I was afraid of the book? But I feel like I pursued art to actually because then I threw a birthday party and declared myself an artist to all my friends. Like I really was like, I'm art. And really went all in on that. But that really enabled me to get messy and to fuck the results and just create for the sake of creating. And I feel like I wrote a different book because of it.
Yeah, I love that. And this is a realization for me, artist, editor, agent, and how I've been over the last year really deconstructing and reconstructing my business, and things are starting to finally, at the time we're doing this interview, things are landing only in the last week that I've been like, yeah, are they ever going to land? And part of that is really loud editor and agent as well. Not letting the artist going, whatever. And because my art is just being myself.
Yeah.
It's just literally telling my truth and using my voice. Train of Truth.
I know. Really, really Train of Truth. That's the loudest one we've had. Really likes that.
Train of Truth really likes that. So it's really, really interesting because it was almost like I remembered when I set out to launch Wild Soul Movement, it was all about never ask permission to express your soul's desires. And last week I was coming back to expressing my desires and I was like, but wait, this was where I started. Did I forget? So it is wild. It really is. And that agent piece, getting caught up in the rules, online marketing, coaching industry, all these places, all these boxes that we go, oh, you're supposed to. You said earlier something like the voice of should, right?
Yeah, totally. Here's how it's supposed to look.
Yeah, supposed to. Should and supposed to are usually, those are red flags for me. Whenever I'm having thoughts and should or supposed to is in the sentence, I always pause. Yeah.
That's wise.
It's like, well, you learn the hard way enough times. You start to, totally. It's like you put your hand on the hot stove. You're probably not going to do that more than one time. So, okay, this is really fun. Why, so not why, but did you actually write the book in 2.5 months?
Yeah.
Cool.
It was a little insane, but I'm so glad it happened that way because I could have written it in 6 months and I feel like I would have been more lackadaisy, but I literally woke up at sunrise, meditated, did yoga, wrote for 5,000 words, repeat 2.5 months. It was the most methodical and regimented I've ever been in my life, but that also, it was so interesting because I always thought that too much structure and regimen actually sucked out creativity. Yeah. But what I found is that I was the most creative I have ever been in my entire life.
I love this point. I love this point because, first of all, I've come to that place as well myself, embracing structure. But, one of the things that we talk about a lot on the show, not as much anymore, are masculine and feminine dynamics. And for all intents and purposes, feminine principle is the creativity, the free flowing, the intuition, allowing things to come through. But the masculine is the vessel. It's the structure we need so that what wants to come through even has something to come into and then can get put out into the world. So I friggin' love that.
I mean, I even to the point like calendared flow hour where it was just like knowing that like at 11 a.m. every single day, I am like just going to go into like flow, see what ideas want to come through, start like story mapping and like doing all of these like where I would like pull out the markers and the crayons and let it be fun. But I like scheduled flow every single day at the same time. And what happened is that like the first few days were like, okay, that's fine. But then it was like my body was prepared for what was going to happen in that hour.
There's a part in Stephen Pressfield's, I think it's The War of Art, where he says something about, waiting for the muse. And if you sit down every morning at 9 a.m., she just happens to show up.
Exactly.
And I was like,
exactly.
You got us, Stephen Pressfield. So there was something you just said that I wanted to ask you a deeper question on. Give me a second. It's not quite landed. Oh, okay. So I'm curious. I didn't pick words this year. I usually pick like a theme word of the year, but my words are picking me this year. And one of them is discipline. So for very selfish reasons, you got really regimented. You gave yourself structure. Are you a naturally disciplined person? Like, was it easy for you to get into that? Did you have to force yourself and like max out all your willpower? Or how were you able to just go, okay, I got to do this and actually do it?
Yeah. I mean, deadline in a book advance were like things that literally very helpful. I don't think if I would have had those things, I would have been as disciplined as I was. And so it was really like knowing the end game, the end goal, and then like the urgency around that. Cause I was like 2.5 months, that's 611 good words a day, not to mention like the editing process and all of that. And so, for me, and it was what I had to basically, I almost had to trick myself because I had to like be like, okay, well, we're going to try on this like discipline thing or this structure thing for a little while. And if it doesn't work, we can always adjust. And that made my like intuitive feminine goddess feel safe and like she could still be playful. But what happened is that because the outcome of doing that was me feeling better and more creative than ever, then it was like I just had to like trick myself into it and then realize like, whoa, actually the impact of this, the implications of this on my life are like, holy shit, I like never want to not have structure again.
This is amazing because I think so many times we talk ourselves out of a thing without actually trying it and seeing what the impact would be. So if we can, it's not about, and I also think we're trying to muster up enough discipline to like run the marathon versus mustering up enough discipline to just start running.
Yeah, totally. And I think I will say, because not having the structure of the book is the masculine frame, but because my life and routine were so structured,
yes,
I had the creative freedom to actually even allow that. If I were like writing at 5 p.m. here and then sometimes 3 here and then like the schedule, I would have felt so much chaos in my life and my schedule that I would have needed structure with the book in order to feel safe and contained. But instead, my life became the container.
So you just explained to me why I hated writing my book. I was just writing whenever the F, and it was torture.
Yeah.
And my habits were, at that point in my life, the worst. Wow. So we're both having realizations on this one.
Yes.
Great.
I love when that happens.
Great. Okay, so what have I not asked you yet about the book that you would love to share?
What's coming up for me is another thing that Cheryl Strayed said, which was, I'm so glad I went to this workshop with her. Like literally, I finished my manuscript in the Redwoods after this workshop with her, because she said there's the book you write and there's the book you publish, and they're not the same thing. And I think that was so permission giving for me because like sometimes we just have to go into those stories to write them because we need to write them for our own soul.
Yes.
That doesn't mean we need to publish them for the world's consumption, but we write them for ourselves. And, and that much of my writing process was like that. Like I wrote 80,000 words and the book is 45,000 or something like that. So like nearly half the book didn't make it in, but I was like processing like dad stuff and like, really going there. And in that, there were like certain gems that came through. And so I think, just giving myself permission, and if you're, as a creative, giving yourself permission to create the thing that doesn't need to be for the world is really, really important. And then go ahead.
Create the thing that doesn't need to be for the world. This is very resonant for me because one of my conflicts creatively and in my work and business over the last year, as I've been taking things apart and putting them back together in a more sustainable way, also more aligned way, is really having to reorient around how much of myself do I want to share with the world? How much is for me? Mm-hmm. And this is something I started just writing stuff that doesn't have to go anywhere. I was attached to, you called it one of the voices, the Mr. Moore. Mm-hmm. Do, produce. And I realized I was like massively overgiving. Mm-hmm. Massively. And then, and to me, resentment is one of the greatest signals that you're overgiving. And then I would feel resentful and be like, but that's no one's fault. I'm the overgiver here. This is me doing this. And I'm like, oh, if I could just keep some stuff for myself, I don't have to be resentful. So that was super helpful. So thanks for saying that.
Yeah. And just like, I can totally relate to that. And even how I got into art was I was so resentful of the people I was coaching. Where I was like, why am I helping them do all these things that I want to be doing? Why am I being a shadow artist? But, with having that space where like, I just want to draw for myself or like create this, not to help anyone except to like work on me.
Or not worry about how am I going to monetize this later.
Yeah, no, like that sacred creative time is so important just for our own nourishment.
Yeah.
And then like what I've found interesting is that oftentimes when I go into that space, that's actually where I find the thing that is actually the thing I want to like create or share.
1,000%. This year, I'm not doing any coaching. I don't have a coach. I'm not doing any programs. I'm not going on any retreats or anything unless it's like to learn a skill. I'm dancing. I'm taking every dance class I've ever wanted to take. And the things that are coming up, the integration of all the other healing and coaching work that I've done over like the last almost decade, landing in ways that couldn't land for me if I was doing it from a head place, which a lot of that work is head stuff, right? Yeah. I'm moving my body. I'm taking salsa lessons and my instructor is like, you have to surrender, but at the same time, keep a little bit of resistance so I can lead you. And I'm like, he's essentially going, follow the resistance and surrender. And I'm like, this guy a friggin' genius, doesn't even know it.
I love that. So important. So important.
So to reiterate, the pieces of the creative puzzle that you're actually intentionally working on to put out in the world often land in the place where you're just playing and just allowing yourself to be creative. Yeah.
Yes, 100%. And this really shifted for me because I was always like, I want to create things to help people. Mm-hmm. And my friend El Luna was like, what if you could heal your own toothache? And that was something that she had pulled from Picasso. But Picasso painted to like heal himself, apparently. Like that's like some of the language he's used. And so she's like, what is your own ache? And how can your creativity serve that ache? And that was like, and I was like, is that selfish? Of course, like, am I then too self-centered? Is it just all about me? But like when I would go into that place and let it serve my own ache, like that was I think some of my most powerful work, most profound and interesting work has come from there. Well, and not to mention that I'm like fucking serving myself in the process of serving other people. And like, why can't we do both at the same time?
Both, right? Because no one is singular in having an ache.
Yeah.
People might have different context or whatever, but like there's no one person, there's no unique ache.
Totally. Yes.
I love that. Okay, what else?
You asking me what else?
Well, I had interrupted you kind of to go a little bit deeper on that creativity thing. And so I think the question that you were answering when I did that, I get a little interrupty sometimes because I get excited.
It's okay. It's flow.
It was about, I had asked you what about the book did you want to share that I hadn't asked you yet? So anything about like the book itself or like the contents of the book or anything?
I mean, I feel like everything we're talking about is is like what it's all about.
Cool. And I tell people this all the time. I didn't even crack. I have no idea. I didn't read the book or anything.
I love it.
I read the description.
Which, like, my least favorite, if I can be really honest, I didn't write the description, and my least favorite thing about the book is the description. But that's okay. I really we had literally 72 versions of that description.
No way.
Just as we had like 47 versions of the cover.
Yeah.
And so, I mean, I love the design of the book is one of my favorite things. But yeah, so I'm very pleased with the conversation we're having.
Okay.
And its relatedness to the book.
Well, and it's you do. When you get people that are committed and dedicated to flow, and that's kind of how they roll, it's always going to be a magical conversation. So what I want to know now is the same way that doing art helped the process of writing the book. How is the process of writing the book serving your life?
Ooh, I love that question. I mean, literally, and it's so funny that you mentioned the initiation around the work, because Nisha Moodley, who I think is a mutual friend of ours, was staying here not too long ago. And she's like, ooh, choose wonder over worry. She's like, that is like to like be the embodiment of that every day. She was like, ooh, like that's a really tough one. And it has changed my life, like in ways that I couldn't have imagined, both by like getting curious about all my shit and like not judging myself for it, not shaming myself, not wronging myself for it, but being like, I'm curious where that comes from, you know? And so just like practicing the work, I feel like has made me a more gentle, a more compassionate, a more like kind human. Not to mention just like noticing like certain addictions and things that I would like cling on to, whether it was technology or wine. Like I'm actually not even drinking alcohol right now because I realized that alcohol was just a numbing device for me. And I would turn toward it. Like I would tell myself it was about like a way of experiencing pleasure. And like, but no, it was really actually, I was like stressed the fuck out and I was like, give me wine, you know? Versus being like, where is the stress coming from? Let me look at the root of this. Let me get curious, you know? And so, you know, just like from an awareness level, a health perspective, like creativity level, I just like feel like my life has like opened up in so many ways.
I feel like there's so many of those avoidance parading itself as self-care things.
Oh yeah, totally. Those all became alarmingly clear.
Alarmingly clear. I for sure also like the last couple of months have really this year, like with that word discipline showing me, I'm like, oh, I see how like I've really developed some habits of lethargy, if you will, sometimes.
Totally.
So it's happening.
One more thing I'll say that's interesting about the message and the work is that, you know, I used to think I was like a vulnerable human with other people, but I realized that I was often afraid to like reveal to people what was going on inside of me. And so like, I mean, this started like, I remember when I went to my agent and was like, my worry voice is saying that I'm afraid of disappointing you and then I'm going to let you down. And being able to share my worries and the voices that were coming up with other people, not only was like a profound framework of like worry is saying this and wonder saying this in communication with Farhad, my fiance, with my agent, with people who are important in my life, but going to them and saying like, you know, I'm really afraid what you're going to think of me. Or like, I remember my editor, because the book I wrote was so different from the proposal that I thought they were going to take my advance away. You know, I thought they were going to be like, we don't want this book. We want the other book. And instead I went to them and I said, you know, I feel a little nervous about this because blah, 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 blah. And then I remember my editor being like, oh, like 50% of authors, like their books look nothing like their proposal. And I'm like, why didn't anyone tell me that in the beginning? You know, like, that's really helpful information.
You're like, I've been choosing to worry a little bit about that one.
Yeah. And also like recognizing like, whoa, when worry is like, there was definitely a point where I was like, this is how worry launches a book. This is not how wonder launches a book. And having to like check myself and be like, all right, this not serving, I feel like a crazy person. Like let's create different, you know, rituals and process here.
Yeah. So what I want to ask you is, how do you, even curiosity can lead to overanalysis. How do you not get in that trap?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think it's, you know, curiosity is here to serve. And if we notice that it's no longer serving, if we're getting caught up in like wanting an answer, it's noticing when it's no longer serving the point.
Got it.
And getting that awareness. That made me think of one more thing, which is like, it's not worry versus wonder or anything versus curiosity versus fear, anything versus anything. It's how do I hold space for both?
Yep.
And so because like wonder without worry, may have these grand, curious plans, possibility. Oh my God. But worry actually really anchors that wonder in like, let's have a plan. Let's know our desired outcomes. Let's like predict what could go wrong and solve for it. And we need both of those aspects of ourselves. Otherwise, worry without wonder is just like anxious, afraid, and always freaking out. And oh my God. And wonder's like, come on. So they need each other. And that's when we tap into the third W that I reveal in the book, which is wisdom. And wisdom is, the ability to see all the various aspects of ourselves and hold space for all of them.
I love that. That is definitely wisdom. So while you were writing the book and you were super disciplined, were you allowing yourself to do anything like watch a stupid TV show here and there, or any just like, let me just get out of, I'm not in art, I'm not in book writing, I also have a life, or maybe I just want to like not think for a minute? Yeah.
The Bachelor, The Bachelorette, and American Idol have been like, I didn't even know reality TV was a thing that I was like ever into, but I've needed something that like literally takes me out of this world into another world, just has me laugh and like not think. And I found, at first I was like judging myself as this junk information TV that I'm putting in my brain. And I was like, no, this is like making me laugh and enjoy. And so it was really important to have like in Bali, it was like, watching Moana, which Moana I think is an fucking amazing movie.
I cried my eyes out.
Yeah. So it's like those, like having those sorts of like release activities that are for just enjoyment have been super helpful for me.
Yeah. And I think, like you said, and people have heard me talk about this on the show before, I think any of that judgment about this is garbage, this is destroying my brain. I'm like, y'all, we need to be able to just like, let me tell you how I got my life last night, scrolling through Instagram, looking at all the Met Gala outfits.
Oh, me too.
I just want to see Lena Waithe wrapped in that pride flag, cloak, cape, whatever it was, on my Instagram feed every day for the rest of my life. Like, get it with your bad self, girl.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like, that's, I feel you. I think it's, and the thing is, because if I let myself go into judgment, I think it's ridiculous, extravagant, and unnecessary. But I just went into like, this is like, look at what these people are wearing. Like, why? I was so amused by it. It was so enjoyable.
So amused. I'm like, I know it's a benefit. They're trying to raise money, which my brain, like, how much do these dresses cost?
Right. And why don't you just give that money? Like,
but no, but it was a show, and I'm like, I want to go to the Met Gala.
I want to go to the Met Gala. I want to be in the background of Tiffany Haddish's Insta story. Do you follow her?
No.
Who is she? Do you know who she is? Did you see the movie Girls Trip with Queen Latifah and Jada Pinkett Smith?
Yeah.
You saw the movie, or just like saw the advertisement?
I saw the advertising for the movie. Yeah.
She was one of the 4 friends. She's like the wild one who like punches people in the face. She has a book called The Last Black Unicorn, which I haven't read yet. It's in my queue.
Oh, I've heard of this. Yeah.
But I watched her, where I fell in love with her is where I watched her interview on The Daily Show with Trevor Noah. Because earlier this year I listened to his autobiography, Born a Crime. Have you listened to or read that?
Good.
Epic. Yeah, because he grew up in South Africa during apartheid. So his stories, actually, my understanding of racism after listening to that, because of how he described like the intricacies of it, was, but he's also just like hilarious, and his voice is amazing, and the stories are just out of control. But he interviewed Tiffany Haddish, and I'm like, I love this woman. She is a straight up brilliant hot mess is how I would describe her. And she's on Jimmy Fallon too. She's just like, she's so funny. She's so great. She's so herself, which is what I really love about her. So
I'm gonna Google her after this.
The book website, you can just go to choosewonderoverworry.com?
Choosewonder.com.
Choosewonder.com. We'll make sure that is in the show notes. It's a beautiful website, by the way.
Thank you.
I know you said the design was like, which doesn't surprise me because you're an artist now. One of your favorite parts. And is there anywhere else or anything else you want people to check out if they're going and looking for the book? Yeah,
well, there's a sample chapter at choosewonder.com if you're curious. And I I'd say like Instagram I'm obsessed with because I love the integration of words and art. And so I'm Hey Amber Ray, RAE on Insta. So I'd love to like hear from you. I always love to hear like what stood out, what resonated, what aha moments did you have? So feel free to shoot me a message or comment on a photo and tell me what landed for you. I'd love to hear that.
That's my favorite now too. Instagram. It's like really the only place I want to interact with people. I still, for some reason, post things on Facebook on my personal profile, but like it's all I don't even mind DMs. People can DM me. I answer them. People are like, I can't. Do you get all this all the time? People are like, I can't believe you answered me. I'm freaking out. And I'm like, what's up?
Totally. I know. I like hate messaging everywhere, except I get so excited on Instagram. I don't know why.
I don't know why, but I hope it never stops because I would like to continue to be excited about receiving messages in at least one place in my life because there's 30.
Well, and I think it is that you can't write an entire like life essay in it. Yeah. You know?
Yes.
Instagram, you don't have the ability to like log into Instagram on your computer and write someone something really like, so it's like short form, digestible, personal. It like, you know, it's not unmanageable.
It's true. It's true. So, question, since you finished the book, have you been reading anything?
Not really yet. You know, I haven't been reading very much. Yeah, no.
But were you reading a lot beforehand? I make an assumption that like you read a lot of books. Maybe you don't.
No, I definitely read. Though I'd say I'm more of a creator than a consumer.
Yeah, I've made that shift the last few years too.
Yeah, and while I was writing the book, like I did have a few, like I had The Artist's Way with me, and I had Cheryl Strayed's Tiny Beautiful Things with me, and I love Tiny Beautiful Things because of her storytelling abilities. And when I would get stuck on telling a story, I would go look at her sentences and say, how does she form a sentence to express an emotion? Or like I would just look for, and I wasn't trying to read the whole thing. I was just looking for like, sentence inspiration.
Yeah. Yeah. I think the name of the book is One Good Sentence. Have you heard of this?
Oh, I have heard of it, but I haven't read it.
I did go on a retreat this year, but it was for writing. So it was for skill. And the co-leader of the retreat was Kate Fagan. Do you know who she is? She works at ESPN. She gave us that book. I'm going to text it to you after the interview so you can see it. And I was like, for anyone who writes, it's just like one sentence at a time. And I'm like, oh my God, this is amazing. Some of the sentences are like, you know, when you run into an exquisite sentence and you're like, oh my goodness. I never think I can actually create them myself. But I don't think we can see our own work the way we can see other people's work for sure.
Yeah, you can definitely craft a very stunning sentence. I know it.
I'm sure we all have the ability. So, all right, I started wrapping it up. Then I got excited to tell you about that book. And now I actually want to read Tiny Beautiful. I've stopped reading nonfiction. I need to read. Okay. So, or like whatever. Is Tiny Beautiful Things nonfiction, or it's just stories, or it's her story?
It's nonfiction, but it's a series of essays from when she was Sugar. So people would write her in letters and she would respond. Like it was an advice column. That's the most non-advice column I've ever read in my life. Like she would like someone writes in just what the fuck. And she'd be like, dear, what the fuck? You know, when I was a kid and I was jacking off my grandfather when I was 3 years old, because like, and just like you're like, what the fuck, this story? And then like, but the way she tells the story is so brilliant and beautiful that you like can't fathom how like, and then she ties it into their question. Like it was, I mean, I think it's, for me, it's like one of the greatest things I've ever read.
Yeah. I think many years ago, I was on a memoir kick. And then I started reading all like nonfiction, like self-help spirituality stuff. And I think I'm phasing out of that. And going back to maybe memoirs, stories. That's it. Everything is the stories, the art of storytelling. I'm kind of obsessed with right now. Okay. Well, I am. So, it's so funny because I batch my interviews. You're my third interview of the day. And the 2 interviews ago that I did was also someone who has a book coming out. And this is what I do. I don't read people's books before they come on my show.
I like that. It's
so fun for me. I don't know if it's fun for them. But people are like offended, like, why am I here? I'm like, well.
No.
So, but I want to read her book too.
Yeah. And like what I love about this is it's so conversational, which is my ideal style. Like I'm not trying to like repeat the same damn thing on because you're my third interview of the day too.
Right. You're on a book
but
tour.
Every single interview has been different.
Yeah.
And that's what I love, because actually I'm finding more and more people are quite conversational in their approach.
Yeah.
Like,
I mean,
I want you to like ask me these same 5 questions.
Yeah. I mean, I don't listen to that many podcasts, but when I hear something and it's like very formulaic, I'm not into that. I can get bored.
Yeah.
I don't want to know what's coming. So, and I can't. I'm not even capable of that. I'll write down like 2 things that I want to ask someone, but for the most part, we have that opening question and then we just roll. So, all right, Amber, thank you so much. ChooseWonder.com, everybody. Follow her at Hey Amber Ray. Is there anything I didn't ask you about the book or anything else that feels important or relevant to the conversation that you want to wrap up with? No is also a viable answer.
You know, I'm going to go with no.
Cool.
I feel complete. Miss Enough is like, we're good.
Miss Enough. Wrapping it up. I like it.
No.
I like to have her around. So, all right, Mama, I'll see you later. Thank you so much.
All right.
Bye.
Thank you. Bye.
And it's interesting because when you look at what people say they want and then what they actually marry sometimes is the opposite of what they've said, and their patterns always were the same. So they were almost never dating their husband or wife. They were dating the opposite of their husband and wife. and then they come to me and they're like, what am I doing wrong? I'm like, you're not dating what you said you wanted. You're dating the exact opposite of what you said. And it happens for both men and women.